Hi, my name is Rusten Hurd. I'm an immigration lawyer with Colombo and Hurd Immigration. And today we're going to talk about everything you need to know about E-2 visas in 2020. We're going to go through a step-by-step guide to the full process to get your E-2, what you need to look for in your business, and what you need to have in order to be approved either here in the United States or at consulate of your choosing around the world. And today I'm happy to be joined by my colleague, Sal Picataggio. Sal, how are you doing this afternoon?
Doing good, Rusten. Good to see you.
Great. All right. So I'm excited to go through this. Let's jump right in, walking through all of the requirements that our clients need to be aware of in terms of the E-2. And so let's talk about initially some basic eligibility issues. What's the eligibility our clients need to have for E-2s?
Sure. The first thing, and it's kind of a binary, is are you from one of the countries on the treaty list of countries that allow for an E-2 investment? There's a long list of countries, some that you'd be surprised about and some that you would be not so surprised about, that would allow for an E-2 investment visa. These are largely created by treaties with the United States, with a couple of exceptions through legislation. Some of the big ones that we deal with a lot are the UK, Canada, Italy, Japan is a big E-2 country. And then some other ones you might not expect, like, well, Brazilians not on the list, but many Brazilians hold an Italian passport, so we're able to work with them that way.
Yeah, absolutely. And another important thing to look at there is the reciprocity between your country, your nationality, and the United States, what the treaty says. Because for some countries, like, for example, the United Kingdom or Canada, those are 5-year treaties. So the visa itself is valid for a period of 5 years. You get 2 years of entry every time you enter the United States on the E-2 visa, regardless of where you're from. And that renews itself with every entry to the United States. But some countries, and one example would be Egypt, only provides for 3 months. France previously had a 5-year treaty with the United States, but now that's been limited substantially by the new treaty. That substantially limits the time frame of the visa. So it's important to take a look at your country, and we can determine that for you, of course, how long the visa is going to be valid for. Now, the E-2 visa is valid. You can always renew it after it expires. It's renewable indefinitely, so that's something to keep in mind.
Yes, very big advantage of the E-2 is that you can renew it and renew it and renew it over and over again.
Now, another question about the E-2 in terms of eligibility, because of course, an E-2, and we're talking about E-2 investor visas here,
That's right.
You have to be able to direct and develop the business. So what is the consulate, or if you're doing it here in the United States, USCIS, looking for to make that determination, Sal?
Sure. I'm seeing usually it's kind of 2 parts. It's what is the actual ability of this person to do it? Do they have the education, the background, the experience to actually run a company? Because this person, the E-2 investor, what you're doing is you're going to be running a business, and they want to know that you could actually run the business. Another part of it, though, is a little bit of math through the ownership of this business. I mean, if an E-2 investor owns 100% of a U.S. business, well, they make all the decisions. They own all of the rights to do that. That is their right as 100% owner. But if you have multiple owners, maybe an E-2 investor owns part of it with their spouse, with some partners, maybe U.S. partners, we need to make sure that they still own at least 50%. Regulations say 50. I like saying 51. You can't argue with the math. 51%, they have a majority say. So a little bit of what's on their resume and a little bit what's on the corporate registration of who's the majority owner will show that the E-2 investor will be able to develop and direct the enterprise.
Yeah, absolutely right. And where we see this coming up usually is when someone has basically no business experience. So, sometimes I get that, it's a young person kind of right out of college or and they're ready, they want to start a business, or maybe their parents are going to gift them funds and they're going to start a business, but they really don't have any experience at all. And so that can be a problem if the consulate doesn't feel that they're qualified. It doesn't mean, though, that if you have 15 years of business experience in one field, that you can't then open a business in another field in the United States. I
That's
haven't
right.
seen a consulate that has approached it that way. I've had a
Yeah.
lot of my clients who have good experience in maybe working for a larger corporation, come to the United States and open, whether it's a restaurant, a retail shop, a gas station, all sorts of different things. It doesn't have anything to do with the type of business that they were involved in abroad. And that doesn't, I don't think it has any impact. So if
Yeah,
you haven't
I
been
haven't
running
seen
a
that
business
either.
for 20 years, that's the same. I don't think that's going to matter.
Yeah, and it's same or different. I've yet to see someone where they may have been running a real estate company abroad, and now they want to come in here and run a restaurant. I have not seen a consulate officer go back and say, well, how are you actually going to run this restaurant? They know that you're going to be able to figure it out. And really then they look at, oh, well, you own 51%. You're developing and directing. It's a little different, the E-2, than something like an L-1, where the actual role of the applicant is a huge, huge, huge part of the case, being an executive or manager. It's a little different with E-2s. It's developing or directing. It's not like I'm an executive or manager. It's a little different.
Absolutely. I think the real key is when you're going in for the interview we're talking about is to make sure you have your business inside out. I mean,
You
that's
got to at least
one
know
thing
what you're
that
running, right?
they're really going to ask you specific questions. Depends on the consulate, but really they're going to ask you a lot of questions specifically. And so that's one of the things where it kind of goes without saying for most of our clients, but it's important that you really have a good grasp on it. And the better grasp you have, the more likely the consular officer is not going to have an issue with that part of it.
So yeah, you keep mentioning the consulate, but are there other ways, Rusten, to go about it? Do we always have to go to the consulate? Can you do it in the United States?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question, Sal. And it brings up, okay, where are you going to process? Are you going to process through a consulate, or are you going to process domestically in the United States? And so the vast majority of our clients do process through US consulates, because consulates are the entities that can issue the visas. In the United States, all you can obtain is status, okay?
Mm-hmm.
So if you enter on a visa, and you're allowed to change status in the United States, which most visas allow you to do,
Mm-hmm.
then you can change in the United States. But all you're getting, if you do that, is 2 years of status as an E-2. So you're getting those 2 years of status inside the United States, but you can't leave. If
Right.
you leave, you're going to have to go through a consulate to get the visa. So in I would say less than 10, 15% of cases that I have elect to change status in the United States. And typically those are people that have no interest in travel. They just want to remain in the United States. Or maybe their consulate that they would go to is a bit riskier to process.
Yeah.
Maybe provides a higher standard associated with the E-2, and they're concerned they may not qualify for one
Some are
reason
like that.
or another.
Or maybe somewhere you're not getting a great visa. We mentioned Egypt earlier, 3 months single entry, or Ukraine, 3 months 2 entries. I don't know why they're expecting you to hop back and forth twice in 3 months, but
Yeah.
if you have a visa that's not that powerful, it's not the full 5 years, multiple entry, renewing your status every time you cross the border, maybe a change of status in the United States is right for you.
Yeah, absolutely. In those rare circumstances, but most of the time, most of our clients do elect to go through the consulate, and for good reason. Now,
It's a powerful visa.
we've gone through, we've looked at, eligibility, seeing that our clients eligible. We've looked at their from the treaty, how they're going to do it. The number one question we get every consultation is always the same: how much do we have to invest?
How much? What's the damage?
How do you determine one of the regulatory requirements? What is a substantial investment?
Sure. And this is the fun trick question of the E-2, because the regulations don't give us a number. We don't see that, oh, it's not like the EB-5. It's $900,000 and we move forward. It's substantial, which means the consulates kind of give us some instructions when you look at what they require. They may say, oh, well, give us some information on some market studies. Give us some information from a trade organization. So they're looking at the data. So it's a little subjective, where if it seems like it requires $100,000 to start a business of the type of business you want to start, then spend $100,000, which is one of the reasons why we think about the type of business you're going to do, whether it's starting something from scratch, buying something that's already operating, or using a franchise. That all makes a difference on how much you're going to end up spending. But if we're going to try to be safe about it, most consulates tend to zero in on $100,000 or more. That's often what I see.
Yeah, I think that that you really hit the nail on the head. That it is the type of business, the nature of the business. Um, for uh, for a lot of clients, if they're starting up, say, a professional services business, like someone
Mm,
that's in accounting or financial analyst or something along those lines, where they're going to be providing a professional service. The fact of the matter is, frequently there's just not that much startup capital that goes into
no.
initial investment, and historically, doing this over a number of years, I've had clients that have gotten approved for as little as 50,000, actually a little bit less than that. But sitting here in 2020, would I want to file that case again today? I probably wouldn't. I would probably
Yeah.
want them to invest more. Certainly, 100,000. I agree with you. Is the magic number where the consulate, almost all of the consulates, are not really going to look too much further into it. If it's above $100,000 and it's clearly substantial, probably there's more to come based on the business plan. I think you're
Yeah.
going to be good at that level. How far below that you get is really going to depend on the type of business. But the days where I would feel very comfortable filing an application in that $50,000 range, those are gone, at least for me, in
Yeah.
terms of the way that the consulates are adjudicating the E-2 visas at the current time. I mean, I don't really feel comfortable submitting an application. Anything less than about 70 would probably be the lowest, depending upon the
Yeah.
nature of the business, and then kind of going up from there if the business is more capital intensive.
Right. And then that also depends on the nature of your startup costs. And there's a little bit of room you can work with that. Other things that some people may not think about when they're making that substantial investment is the various costs that will be counted towards that. It's not just
Good point.
there's the lease. Typically it's what you've paid for the lease, not how much the lease is worth over the 2, 5, 10 years. So maybe you prepay a little bit more of the lease. You look at your professionals' fees. You look at maybe some travel expenses. You look at the business plan you might have to get prepared. There are various other costs that are associated with preparing the E-2 itself that may be counted towards your overall investment. So what seems kind of daunting, like, $100,000 a lot. Well, maybe you think, maybe 20 grand of that is going to be stuff I'm going to need to do anyway just to get the darn visa approved. So there, I'm really only looking at 80. Can I do the rest of that? And it matters, it's about the argument. It's about, are you really committing those funds? Does it really make sense for the type of business you're in? Are you spending it on the right things? Yeah, services is going to be lower. What are you spending it on? A premises and some computers. But if you have inventory, you can go and buy inventory. If you need storage, you get some storage space. If you have marketing costs, there's various other things you can do to work out what you can spend on your E-2 investment.
Absolutely. So we've got the nationality. We know that. We've looked. We know how long. We get a 5-year visa. We know we're going to go through the consulate. We know how much we're going to invest, and it's clearly substantial.
Mm-hmm.
What are we going to do from here? How are we going to go about getting the visa? If I'm an investor, I'm looking to get the visa now.
Mm-hmm.
What are the steps I'm going to take to get the visa in the United States?
Sure. Are we assuming that we know what we're investing in yet, or just that we know how much we're willing to spend?
Oh, we know what we're going to spend.
Sure. Well,
okay, figure out what we're going to invest in.
Yeah, what are we going to invest in? So we kind of mentioned earlier in talking about developing directing, a lot of times people come and want to do the thing they were doing at home. If they're familiar with that business activity, they may want to continue that. Say they were in construction, they want to go back into construction. If they were in real estate, they may want to go back into real estate. If they were in food, they want to go back into food. But that doesn't mean you have to. If you pick something, as long as it is going to be an active and viable business that has the opportunity for job creation, has the opportunity to support itself and the investor in terms of how they're getting paid, the business activities can be pretty varied. We need to think about some things like job creation. But as long as it's a business that you're passionate about and you want to run, and that's something where you think will be viable long term, it's something that we can work with and fit it to the requirements of the E-2. But that means you gotta find it. Either you gotta set it up from scratch, or you need to find something that's already operating that you can buy into, which is something where we review those kind of things for the immigration side of stuff. So does this existing business support a potential E-2 investment? Are we looking at its revenue and its hiring practices, its business activity, all that?
Okay. So in look, whether we're going to purchase an existing business or we're going to start our own business from scratch, either way, our clients are looking to come over to the United States to set up the business. And so for the most part, the protocol is going to be step one, entry on either a visa waiver or another type of visa, or some of our clients are already here. Do you have to be present in the United States in order to start the process? You don't. But most times, whether they're scoping out and doing their due diligence on a existing business, or whether they're looking at actually physically starting their own business here from scratch, which is perfectly fine. In those cases, most of the time I find my clients are actually physically present in the United States to be able to get a good foothold. And you have to be here first in some other fashion than on the E-2, because the E-2 is the culmination of your efforts. It's not the beginning of them. So typically, what my clients will do, they'll come over on an E-2, I'm sorry, as a visitor, or they'll be here as a student, or they'll be here as a derivative of their spouse's visa. And then they will, step one is always getting their own personal bank account. And generally, you have to be physically present in the United States to open up your own bank account. So then once you have your own bank account open, you can, of course, transfer your funds into that bank account. So you have your funds in your personal bank account here in the United States. At that point, you can go ahead and select the type of entity that you wish to create. Different states have different guidelines in terms of the entity, but most of our clients end up selecting some form of limited liability company. Whether they're the sole owner of that company and utilizing it as a pass-through entity, or sometimes I have clients who elect to take more complex corporate structures. It really depends, but either way, certainly to protect you from personal liability, the second step is really to create that corporate formation of some sort. Once you have the company formed, and typically that's a relatively straightforward process of registering the name and the other information you need to with the state of formation. Once you have that company formed, then you're going to request the tax ID number. The tax ID number is a really important piece of information that you need to be able to basically do anything with your business. But the thing that the tax ID number is going to allow you to do immediately is to get your company bank account. Because then once you've got your company bank account, you can take your funds, and this is before you purchase a business, before you purchase anything, you can take your funds and transfer them from your personal bank account to your company bank account. Okay? So now you've got your company set up, you've got your funds invested into the company, and you are set to go with whatever you want to do. That's basically step by step of getting your company set up initially, getting the funds into it. And now, of course, there's a little more to it, what you have to do in order to reach that level. But now you're really ready to make a decision as to whether to go ahead and purchase an existing business, start your own business, or go another route with a franchise in there. Sal, talking about the advantages or disadvantages of starting up your own business versus purchasing an existing business, what would you be looking at in making that determination?
So when someone's asking me which one to do, when a new business is a lot of flexibility, a lot of control that the investor gets to keep themselves. They are running the show from top to bottom. They are their own, the master of their own domain in that regard. They are making sure that the business is operating to their specifications. And E-2 can be very entrepreneurial. It definitely attracts a lot of entrepreneurial folks who want to come to the United States and pursue that. So when they're starting something from scratch, they're able to really control it top to bottom. Also, they are able to control the investment. They are determining how much goes into it because they're making those decisions. I need to spend this much on a lease. I need to spend this much on inventory. Of course, we're going to try to reach the goal of total investment here, but they're able to determine how they break that down. They're going to be flexible in terms of where they locate their business, how they're going to market it. They're really in control of every single little thing with a new business. The disadvantages of a new business is, how do you show you're committing those funds? We're talking about a business that is not operating, that you are asking someone to spend money on something that isn't running and they don't have a visa yet. So there's a little bit of a chicken and egg situation, and a very confident client will be ready to go on that journey with us and to use this opportunity to get an E-2 visa. But that's the one thing that is often in the back of folks' mind is, well, what if I spend all this money and what if I don't get the visa? Look, consulates they have their challenges, they have their quirks, and is that possible? Maybe. But I do know if you don't spend the money, you won't get the visa. So you got to spend the money, and new businesses are really all about, you have to commit those funds to getting it going. But an existing business, what do you think, Rusten?
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. I mean, look, I agree with you wholeheartedly that the new business is all about ensuring that irrevocable commitment of funds. And that's one of the requirements for the E-2 visas. The funds have to be at risk. You can't simply have those funds as working capital in your company bank account. They either have to be spent, or we have to be able to demonstrate clearly that there is a contract that's irrevocable, confirming the commitment of those funds and that those funds will be spent. So for a new business, my clients that go that route, and I would say it's probably about a third of my clients are going to utilize the new business route. They really have to understand that they're getting the business set up, and they are, typically I want to have an employee at the beginning to start. We're going to have money spent to have the office space. We're going to have money spent on inventory or equipment or other items associated with the business. And we're going to need to show a significant amount of those funds spent, actually spent and gone out of the company bank account in order to be applying for the E-2. We also are going to need to show how the business is going to survive over the next 3 to 4 months or so, that we have the funds to be able to keep that business running while it's getting off the ground. And of course, the business plan is going to go into that in some detail. So for a new business, my clients really that do a new business are typically people that really have a strong idea, strong commitment to go a certain route. They really want to do it. They're entrepreneurs that are really committed to some type of project that they definitely feel it's their goal to do that. And then they have the funds to be able to do that with it. And they're going to go for it regardless. So, and that's great. Startup businesses can be very successful. But the downside to that is you cannot use an escrow. You cannot use these days. Back in the old days, things were a little different.
You used to. They were cool.
Use an escrow, potentially in some cases, some consulates. These days, I wouldn't feel comfortable using an escrow with a startup business. It's very risky.
Yeah, they don't see it as committed. Oh, well, if you get it back, like, yeah, but it's a legally binding document. It's there. It's not mine. And the only condition is either I get approved or not. To me, that's committed. But I see how the consulates are doing it, and it's just, it's not. Is it worth doing it that way? Is it worth putting yourself and your clients at risk if you're going to go that route? No, it's better to plan to make a better plan.
Now, talk a little bit about, Sal, if you're selecting an existing business. What are some of the advantages and any disadvantages to that?
My favorite advantage is actually just that point about the commitment of funds. It's a lot clearer. The business costs what it costs. Of course, it's always good to do some financial due diligence with an accountant or with a business broker to determine that it's properly valued. But if that listing says this business is worth $100,000 and you spend the $100,000 or put it in escrow first, here's when escrow is okay, then great, you did it. You committed the substantial amount. It's the amount that is required to obtain that business, and you have spent it. And in fact, you're probably going to spend a little more, again, on professionals' fees, getting a business plan, other costs associated with taking over this business. But it's a very clear thing to show to the officer at the consulate that, well, it costs that much, I spent that much. It's committed. It's either in escrow or I completed the purchase, it is done. Another advantage is that you are picking up where someone already built up a business, a brand, an identity, a space in the community, a product or a service. You're taking that over. You're not coming here and bringing something new to market or establishing something brand new where people may not know your brand, your business, your service. You're taking something over. So maybe you're buying a hair salon. The people in that community are going to know what that hair salon's about. They're going to recognize the name. They're going to know where it's located. They're going to be familiar with the stylists. And you could use that to your advantage to keep the process going, to keep the goodwill going, and keep the money flowing, to keep the revenue high. That kind of is also where there might be a slight disadvantage, where customers are loyal and maybe they don't like a change in ownership, or perhaps it's just the business was strong, and it's just hard to even run an existing business. And you have to be able to run a business where you may not be familiar with that type of business, but you're running it anyway. It was always run. You still have to worry about the existing employees and keeping them happy. So I think an existing business, I think the advantages outweigh the disadvantages compared to something like a new business. But you have to be mindful of that potential for change once you do take it over and you have the keys to that existing business, how you keep that success going.
Yeah, I think you have to look at it from an immigration perspective versus you as an investor from that perspective. And from an immigration perspective, it generally is easier to get an E-2 with an existing business, generally speaking. And the reason for that is, as Sal noted, you've got everything already documented, okay?
It's there.
Because you're going to need to have, and what we would strongly recommend our clients who are considering purchasing an existing business, you want to ensure that you're getting 2 years of tax returns from the seller. When you're doing your due diligence, you want to, obviously you're going to get a profit and loss statement, but you're also going to get the tax forms, W-2s, and quarterly tax forms that are sent to the business to verify the employment that they've had. So you've got all of that, and you want to get that before you sign on the dotted line concerning the purchase of the business, or if you're purchasing it on a contingency basis, which is also possible. We'll go into that in just a moment. But you want to make sure that you have all that so you're going to be successful at the consulate. Yes, absolutely. If the business is worth $100,000, it's worth $100,000. But the consulate is going to want to see that documentation to verify that your purchase is going to be sufficient. Otherwise, they can give you an issue with respect to valuation. So let's jump into that actually for a moment on the contingency basis, because that's something that we need to go into. About an existing business and whether you can do that and what situations you can do that in. Sal, why don't you talk a little bit about contingencies? What percentage of E-2s do you do that on, and how successful is that?
Sure. For buying an existing business, almost all of them. Very, very popular among my clients who want to do that contingency when they're buying an existing business. Also, it's one of the only things explicitly supported in the Foreign Affairs Manual. Absolutely. Where all the regulations live. They specifically say, as an example, if you're buying something existing, you could put that money into escrow and make it contingent upon the approval of the E-2 visa. We used to use that as an example in the past where we could apply that to potentially startup costs with new businesses and say, contingent upon the approval, here's all the things that the money will be used for. Here's a list of invoices and purchase orders. And upon approval, I will actually buy these things. But today, it's really not something that we can do as easily or even at all sometimes. So really, if you're buying an existing business, that's where contingencies come into play. And really the one contingency that they want to see is approval or denial of the visa. They don't want to see a ton of other contingencies thrown in there. There's going to be closing contingencies in these standard closing agreements, but the one that the consulate really wants to see is the visa approved or not. That's what's going to trigger the release of those funds from the legally binding escrow to complete the purchase of the business.
Exactly, because a lot of times in these asset purchase agreements, especially the standard business broker agreements, you'll see a lot of contingencies, due diligence, inventory. There can be a variety of ways that you can back out of an agreement. But what the consulate really is going to look for is that the issuance of the E-2 is the only contingency, or primarily the only contingency. That's what the FAM speaks to, as you noted. Because if there are other contingencies, some consulates, like London, for example, is a big one on this. They're a big stickler on the contingencies. If they see anything else, you may well have a problem. Other consulates are a little more flexible about it, so it depends. I talk with your attorney about how to best structure it. But from our standpoint, definitely we want to limit it so that only the E-2 issuance is the only thing that's pending. The funds have to be placed in an escrow account. So you can't, most contracts allow for an initial deposit, say 10, 15, 20,000, something like that, and then the rest to be done at close. But you have to have the full amount of the investment placed in the escrow. Otherwise, you're not eligible for the E-2. You can't just have a portion of it in there. It's got to be all in there. And immediately after issuance of the E-2, then the funds convey to the seller. So yeah, it's not virtually 100% for me. I would say it's probably about maybe 2/3 of my existing businesses utilize an escrow just as a means of protection. But and it actually has gotten less and less of late. I mean, you have to find a seller that's willing to cooperate with you.
Right.
You also have to understand the time frame that the consulates are taking now, especially in light of everything that's going on currently with respect to coronavirus. The consular processing times are elongated significantly. So sellers may not be as willing to work with contingency agreements. And it's obviously based on the agreement the seller would have to reach with the buyer. So something to consider.
Absolutely.
Okay, so we've looked at the differences between opening up a new business and existing business. We've got also kind of one other option is a hybrid.
Yeah.
That you've worked with a lot, Sal, is utilizing a franchise as a vehicle to get an E-2. Just talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, hybrid I think is the perfect way to put it because it's a little bit new, but you get some of the benefits of existing. It would be considered a new business, as a new location, but it's of something that's already operating. So say it's a, can I say brands? Will YouTube get me? Panera Bread? I've heard that Panera Bread is one of the large food franchises that will allow for foreign investment. Not everyone does. But something like Panera Bread, there's obviously Panera Breads everywhere. You can go get a coffee and a bagel all over the country. But this would be a new location that an E-2 investor would use. They would use that the franchise to support the new business. But what's nice about it is a franchise fee and a bunch of costs are going to be laid out. And a lot of that will be spent in order to get it going. So the problems we had with new businesses of, okay, am I really committing these funds? What am I committing them on? Well, now we have it laid out. The franchise agreement will lay out, here's how much the fee is, here's some other costs we're expecting you to make to get this off the ground. So that's already laid out and something you can hand a consular officer that they could read easily. Also, you have a franchisor who's going to want the business to succeed as much as you do. I mean, yeah, ultimately it's the investor's responsibility to operate this business and run it and be the one who develops and directs it. But they're going to have a franchise model, a franchise system, and a franchisor in their corner to make sure they're kind of doing things the right way, or at least set them in the right direction. So if you've never run a business in the United States, you're not just going to be completely on your own out in the, floating in the middle of the ocean there. You're going to have someone guiding the ship a little bit.
Right. So, so finally, we get to kind of the last area we need to consider in the context of the E-2 visa, which is to demonstrate that the investment is non-marginal. So when you look at marginality, I'll go into this a little bit initially. The FAM notes that you have to be able to demonstrate that the investment is not merely sufficient for you and your family, but it's going to go beyond that. But a couple of years ago, the Trump administration added to that a little bit with Buy American, Hire American proclamation, which essentially has consulates looking to U.S. job creation as one of the specific items in order to determine whether they should approve the visa. So although marginality used to go more towards profit, viability of the business, maybe a little bit of employment mixed in, now employment is a key factor. Yeah. So my recommendation for my clients is you do want to have at least one employee when you're starting the business off at a minimum, but then with a 5-year financial projection that we need to submit with a business plan showing the growth of that, usually to 3 employees, a minimum of 3 over the 5 years, and certainly going up from there. And it depends on the type of business. Obviously, if you're operating a restaurant or something that's real employee intensive, then that's going to probably be a higher amount of employees you're going to want to have versus, again, a professional services type company where maybe you're just, you can have a receptionist, you can have a secretary, maybe a marketing person, this type of thing. Maybe there's not as many employees that you're going to need to have associated with that type of business. But the consulate is going to be looking specifically to development of employees as part of issuance of the visa.
Yeah, and that's what makes a business plan a key document to get prepared and reviewed by your immigration attorneys to make sure it is covering things like employment creation over the course of the 5 years. And yes, those financial projections are super important because they want to see that those numbers at the bottom are showing that you can cover all the costs of these employees as well, that you have the projections to cover the investor's salary that he or she will take, but also that of the staff. And yeah, we look at what the business is actually going to do. And if it makes sense to have a bunch of employees, then you might want to consider that. But if it really only makes sense to have a handful, great, you do that as well. Something else with marginality and job creation is that You have the time to do it. It doesn't have to be right at the beginning. You get 2 years of status, and for many countries, a 5-year visa. You use that time to your advantage if you have to. If it's one of you may start with just the one, and then the E-2 investor is there as well once they get approved. But then you may not need to do it all right at once. I mean, if you can, great, but use the time to your advantage if you need to. Use those 2 years, or if it's a situation where you're not going to renew your status but renew your visa, use the 5 years, and then you can build it up over time to get that 3 or 4 or 5, however many you need. Again, this isn't like an L1 where you may have 10 or 15 employees supporting an L1 manager. It's a lot more flexible with E2, and usually to the benefit of the investor.
Okay, so we've gone through the process. We've gone through all of the requirements. Number one question I get, okay, how long is it going to take me, Sal? How long is it going to take me to get my E-2?
Are we talking post-COVID, or are we talking about normal situation?
Yeah, so I mean, really from here, I mean, and both standpoints. First of all, in terms of setting up the business and getting everything together to be able to file, and second of all, in terms of when do I get my E-2?
Sure. So putting it all together, I mean, we tend to push our clients. We really want things to get moving quickly because we got to get all this stuff together, especially with buying an existing business. These sellers are going to want this stuff handled pretty quickly. So we push. We work on getting if a business plan is needed, that's an early thing we want to get onto because that may take a couple of drafts. That may take a few weeks to prepare. But parallel to that, we are also reviewing, gathering information on the source of funds. We're also worried about again, if there's purchase agreements to be reviewed, we're working on that. So if the business is selected, or if it's a new business and we know what we're doing and we're putting it all together, with all the documents in place, we can turn around a final application very quickly. Typically what I see, the thing that ends up adding to the timeline is I need to find the right business for me. I'll use one extreme example where I worked on an E-2 a couple years ago where it took almost a year to get the thing filed from when they hired me. But let me tell you, 10.5 months of that was finding the right business back and forth. And they weren't in the US for the most part to do it. So they were relying on the business broker and us to help them out. And business after business just wasn't right for them. And they were very cool about it. They were very patient. But once that business was selected, I'm telling you, it was warp speed and we got that thing filed right away. But then you have to look at the consulate you're filing with. Some consulates will turn around a case very quickly. For example, a Brazilian filing with their Italian, usually, passport, they file the documents and they're calling for an interview in about 10 days.
In Sao Paulo.
In Sao Paulo. But
Not
if you're filing, if you're doing it through Sao Paulo, it's 10 days. But if you're going to, say, the UK, it's 45 days that they're going to spend reviewing your case, which not too long ago was 90. So they actually gave you a bit of a bonus there. Actually, it's only 45.
But if you're going to Rome, last one I did last year is over 3 months, I believe. And the Netherlands, for example, it's even longer than that. So it really depends on your consulate. Toronto, all of the new Canadian E-2s are processed through Toronto. And Toronto historically has been very quick. But of course, right now, because of the significant closures associated with coronavirus, and of course, they're not processing in Sao Paulo right now. They're not processing in Toronto right now. So it's not possible to get that appointment as we sit here for this. So it is going to take time for the consulates to catch up, especially since they're going to be social distancing as well, limiting the number of interviews per day. It's likely going to result in a significant delay.
Yeah.
It's really hard to say how long that's going to be. And we'll just have to work with the consulates over time in order to verify with them. But understand there is going to be a delay associated with it. And I agree with you, Sal, in terms of putting things together. I filed an E-2 in as quick as 2 days, and one that felt like 2 years. Maybe it wasn't quite that long, but really it is based on the business. We're documenting your business. We're putting everything together to show the consulate the viability of your business, and everything really stems from that. Yeah, there's some legal writing in there, but really it's just supporting what you have already created and what we're making sure meets the requirements. Yeah. So Sal, we've gone through basically everything associated with the E-2, but what is the one thing when you see someone that comes to us, we didn't represent them, but they had an issue with the consulate and they came to us after they had a problem? What's the one thing that you're seeing that people aren't really prepared for with the consulate?
The one thing I always try to prepare people for with the consulate is, other than you really need to know your business, because they really want to know that you know what you're investing in, is we have to remember this is a non-immigrant visa. I've seen plenty of clients, they go to the consulate and most of the questions end up being, but what if the business is super successful? Don't you want to stay in the United States? And I've heard the stories from my clients where the consulate officer are really trying to determine, do they really have that temporary intent that they're going to depart at the end of this period, or do they really have plans to stay in the United States? It's definitely an important thing to consider because, yeah, E-2 is temporary. You could renew it over and over and over again, but your intent is not to become a permanent resident through this. So be prepared for those kind of questions on top of the typical, well, tell me about your business. How much did you spend? How are you running it? That kind of thing.
Absolutely. Good advice, Sal. And so we've gone through basically everything you need to know in terms of the E-2 visa for 2020. Well, certainly not everything, but at least an overview.
Yeah.
If you have additional questions, our contact information is below in the description. There's also a link to our website with additional information, frequently asked questions regarding the E-2. But if you're going to go through this process, you really need to speak with an attorney, whether it's us, one of us, or someone else from our firm or another firm that really knows what they're doing. What I have seen, one of the biggest failures I've seen is people that are well-meaning attorneys, but they don't specialize in E-2s. They do general immigration, but they haven't done a lot of E-2s, and they don't know exactly what a consulate is looking for.
Mm-hmm.
And they miss something, and it causes a big problem for the client. So I would strongly recommend you to speak with someone that knows what they're talking about when it comes to E-2s, to make sure that you're not going through a very expensive process of investment and not getting a good result in the end. And with that, I'd like to thank everyone for joining us today. I hope you've learned a little bit, and we look forward to talking with you soon. Thanks.